everyone, and welcome to another episode of His and Hers Rules of Engagement. I am your host, T. Jamal, joined as always by my lovely co-host, Rocco Bella. How are you doing today?
I am lovely over here rocking the bells, ready and excited about our topic today.
Yeah, it's an important one, which I don't believe that we have covered any topics that aren't important. These are very necessary conversations to have, especially in the Black community, because a lot of the times we take terms from the mainstream and then we just kind of utilize them without ever really assessing what it is that they mean and how they can affect us, how they affect how we see one another, and even like our portrayal in the overall media. So today we are covering toxicity. And a lot of people have heard of the term toxic masculinity. So we will address that, but we will also address whether or not there is toxic femininity. But before we move on, I just want to talk about the term toxicity itself and what it means. And Rockabella, you go on and tell us, when you hear the word toxicity, what comes to mind, even if it's just the definition of it from the dictionary, and then I'll follow up.
Okay, well, when I hear the word toxicity, I think about poison, not being able to breathe, hazmat, just I also think about like a nuclear bomb and like the radiation that comes after and it burns your skin off. Nothing positive. Like you don't want to be in a toxic environment. And there's another
Right.
word. At all. Like it spreads, it's contagious. Like once one person is toxic, does it kind of like a toxic person, toxicity or a toxic chemical just kind of corrupts the entire environment. And it doesn't just, like, can you be toxic in a silo if you're home? You're toxic because you're yelling at the TV in a certain way. But yeah, that I think about poison. Poison.
So that's interesting, right? Because we sometimes use words so often that they kind of lose meaning, and we kind of forget how devastating these words are. So yeah, in the dictionary, I looked up toxic, and toxic, the first definition that comes up is poisonous. And then the second definition is denoting or relating to debt, which has a high risk of default. So, as you said, there's nothing positive about the term or the word toxic or toxicity or being in an environment that is surrounded by it. Another thing that you said was contagious, and to think about a contagion of it being, given to other people just by virtue of being around somebody who has that environment. And it's funny, I don't ever really hear about positive attitudes or positive things being contagious. Right? I don't hear too often that, you hear that a bad apple spoils the bunch.
Spoils. Right.
But it's one bad apple, but the good apples don't make the bad apple good. The one bad apple rots all of the rest of the good apples. And that's just interesting to me how, negativity kind of overpowers positivity in that way. And it happens, in nature, it happens in our lives, and we allow those things to kind of creep into our mindsets. So we talked about what toxicity is, and we already alluded to the fact that we are going to discuss toxic masculinity. But first, I want to just talk about masculinity in itself. Rockabella, when you hear masculinity or when you think of a masculine person, what comes to mind?
The Rock. when I think about
Okay.
masculinity, it's weird. And maybe I'm in a weird space right now, and I'm sorry, but I think about shoulders and broad. I actually think about protection. I think about
Mm-hmm.
standing firm in your ground, and and I think about it, and I think about it in a positive light. But I also think about peacocking, like, bruh, like, you don't need to do all of that. But you've seen the uncle that comes to your graduation, and he has all this green on, like a green hat, a green suit, some green gaiters. I'm talking Stacey Adams, and like,
Mm-hmm.
and the only thing he didn't bring out was his green gloves and a green cane, and it's lime green, folks. That is like, is that masculinity? Is that peacocking? Like, what is that? So on the positive side, I think about The Rock, and I'm just going to say that because his outward projection of who he is. He seems, he's a daddy now, so he seems very protective of his girls. And then his build, I just from straight up out the gate, I think about muscles, and I think about a big guy, like, oh, he's masculine. And it's weird because my short guys are gonna feel funny about me saying this. I don't know, a short masculine dude. I've seen them, but it's just like, if I I won't say that. But masculine, yeah, I think, about protection. I think about muscles. I hear a deep voice.
Mm-hmm.
All of that kind of comes into play. So that's
Yeah. And, some of those things have to do with society, but some of those things are just natural. Like majority of men grow to be larger than women in just our form, you know, strength, to be that shield, to be that protection. Um, and so how those things align is so funny because a lot of the topics that we will cover on this show will always beg to question, how much is it nature, how much is it nurture? And I think it always kind of starts with the nature, where you look at the generalization of what men tend to grow up to be, and then you start to nurture them to utilize those gifts or those abilities, and then it becomes kind of muddied in the middle once civilization comes into being. You just get used to, okay, the men are doing this because they are able to do it. So masculinity, when I think about it and the definition of it, qualities, attributes regarded as characteristics of men. And in itself, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with being masculine. And masculinity is, like you said, what comes to mind for me is like this aura, this demand for respect, this some level of strength, and for me, an ability to attract women. And you mentioned peacocking, and it brought to
yes,
mind like the fact that a lot of people look at peacocks, they're colorful. And I remember when I learned that the peacocks that do all of that strutting and have all of the colors and everything are actually the men, because that
right.
is a part of their mating ritual, and that's how they get the woman to pay them attention. And also, I think about crickets at night, and that sound that we hear are the male crickets getting the female crickets' attention. And so it's them rubbing their legs against each other, and they make that noise. It's not even coming from, their mouths. It's not a sound that they're making vocally. It's a sound that they're making with their legs. And I think it's the loudest like noise attracts the woman faster to you or whatever it is, but they do it every night in unison, and we all are used to hearing it. And so just in nature, just looking at those things of how men do certain things just in animals, right? Just to attract women and to do certain things. And I think sometimes those healthy attributes can kind of turn sideways when the volume is turned up too much, right? Blowing out the bass. So we'll stop right there on how we think about masculinity before we dive into anything else, and then talk about femininity. What comes to mind when you think about femininity?
Femininity, the first thing that comes to mind, because I said The Rock, I'm going to say Beyonce. I think about curves. I think about, gentle movement, soft, pink. Criticizing if you're calling a man feminine and he's feminine acting, he's doing dainty, dainty things like a man raised by a woman might run feminine. Just tone and voice, lighter, softer. Lighter, softer. Pretty comes to mind. Pretty. That's what I think about when you think about when I think about femininity.
Soft. Soft comes to mind, and not always soft in like the way that we use soft now, as in weak. Just okay. Soft. Soft doesn't have to be weak. Right. And I think sometimes there's a battle between just even femininity as a thought, because so much of it has to do with like words like soft that have come to have a different type of connotation, that even women, as they start to become more independent in thought and want to, feel respected, I see a lot of people start to lean away from femininity as an identity because it is seen as weakness or lower than masculinity. And I think that my appreciation for femininity, I see strength. I just see strength in other areas. I could never deliver a baby. Like, that's not something that I'm physically able to do. I couldn't imagine going through a menstrual cycle. I couldn't imagine going through menopause. And those three things are things that only women are able to do.
And those are not soft.
Right. They're not soft. It's not sweet. They're pretty.
You gotta be strong as hell.
So I think sometimes femininity gets a bad rap, even from women themselves, as they try to gain respect in a world that is seen as run by men. Sometimes and I talk about this when I talk about race relations, when I talk about neo-colonialism, where the way neo-colonialism works is, instead of trying to get rid of the power structure, you just want to get rid of the person in power and replace them and keep the same structure. So as Black people being oppressed by white people, thinking that getting rid of white people is going to solve the problem isn't the right mind frame. They can be destroyed and fall off the earth, but if we still have the same system of power in place, that just means somebody is going to replace them by doing the oppression. So sometimes when I hear the extreme feminist type speak, it sounds like they don't just want to advance the thought of femininity. They want to become masculine.
So you think about Wonder Woman and like the Amazon concept.
As if they see masculinity still as the goal.
Yeah.
That is the strength. And to move away from the traditional thoughts of femininity. Now that's just me. So we welcome, comments in the comment section on just the way that I think, but this is what I see a lot. Instead of seeing, let me raise up people's value on what we do as women and how we portray strength in different ways, or how we, attain authority in different ways and get things done. Let's show them that we can do the same thing that men can do. But you never hear that argument from men trying to prove that we can do what women can do. It's because that it's already been bought and sold that the masculine is superior. I think that is what I'm hearing when I hear people, do things like that. Anything you can do, I can do better. I'm not saying that to a woman. I cannot do anything you can do better, because there are certain things that you're just going to always have an upper hand on me. But is it that you value the things that I can do more than you value the things that you can do? What are your thoughts on that?
So I wrote down here, nothing wrong with being masculine. And then the thought of masculinity as being superior, and maybe even masculinity being a goal. Like when you have this thing about independent women and this I don't need a man kind of mentality. And there's even been some stories about that women can procreate amongst themselves, and that we used to do it, long time ago, but all we could probably make are girls. We wouldn't be able to make boys. So it's I don't know. That was interesting that you said, like, and then masculinity being superior. Is it superior, or is it just dominant? Like, we could be on the same platform doing the same thing, and if we get to a point and I'm speaking my mind and you're speaking your mind, and you're a man and you push me, you're bigger than me, you're gonna knock me down. Like, so it translates more into like a physical thing, I think, than it is anything else. Because you can, if a man punches a woman, it's gonna, in theory, it's gonna have more of an impact than if a woman punches a man. So it's would you be afraid of ultimately challenging a man because he's stronger than you? His impact of punching you in the face would affect you more than if you tried to punch him in the face. I don't know. I don't condone violence, people, at all. I'm just using that as an example.
So my thought about that is, I was saying that, not that I see masculinity as more superior than femininity. I think that society has played a trick on all of us into making us believe and buy into the fact that masculinity is tied to all of these strength type attributes, and then tying all of these weakness type attributes to femininity, so much so that even the women will buy into it. Even as they fight for themselves, they're fighting for the thought of being thought of as more masculine, because not that it is more superior, but the thought is that it is more superior. So in order for me to gain respect in this world as a woman, I believe that I have to show that I can do more masculine type things. I have to show the evidence that I can contribute in the masculine type way, where I just admitted as a man that I do not have the strength to go through a monthly menstrual cycle. I couldn't believe that I could handle one of them. I don't believe that I can do one pregnancy and childbirth. I don't think I can do one day of menopause, because I've watched people very close to me like go through it. And it's just, is interesting. Living in the
So
house with somebody.
let's think about this. Okay,
Hmm.
this goes back to agency and power.
Right.
Um,
Yes.
if a woman is taking a stand politically, or even as like I'm just gonna say an FBI agent or whatever, she
Hmm.
has to wear pants. She has to wear pants. Not
Hmm.
even like the 3/4 cloth never showing your stuff off, like the long, not even like a long skirt, but she has to wear like a pantsuit in order to come out and just kind of be an equal to, like, I'm a serious woman, therefore thine clotheth thine self in pants.
Hmm.
But if the same woman exerted her power in a form-fitting badass suit, it's a different type of power. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
But it will distract a man from the message. So a woman cannot, or it's hard for, I have to stop using like definitive, like a woman cannot. I have to stop saying that.
Hmm.
It's hard for, in my experience and what I witnessed, for a woman to actually get her point across if
Right.
she is attractive, and
So,
so she assumes this masculine suit by wearing like pants,
hmm,
like, I don't know.
yes, it is. It's a hard conversation, which is why we are talking about our rules of engagement, right? Some of these
Right.
rules are wrong that we currently have, so we have to rewrite them.
Yes.
We were talking about this a little bit last week when we were talking about WAP, and I was saying that if somebody who wasn't as shapely as a Meg or Cardi wore the same outfit, it would not garner the same attention. But are we seeing that as a weakness because they are able to do what they do to men? I don't see that as a weakness at all. And it's
So
like, mhm,
are we constantly fighting a primal like urge?
yes,
Okay,
definitely.
because that's,
It's
it's
a,
like, oh, she's up there, she's smart, she's saying, oh, look at that, or it's like he's up there, he's there like, oh, look, he got some nice broad shoulders. Oh my God, what is he
mhm,
talking about? That's my professor. I need to pay attention. So
yeah,
we're that's the problem, or the not the
yes,
problem, the issue
you're
is
right.
that we're always fighting our primal
Think about
urges.
it.
But
We talked about pretty privilege.
yeah,
There are certain things that pretty can get you in the room, right? That
right,
if you're not deemed as, I'll say, attractive to a majority of people or overwhelmingly attractive, that you may not have access to, or people may not listen to you because you're not attractive. And then in certain arenas, your attraction can distract people from taking you seriously. It goes both ways. Sometimes, if you, and it depends on the industry, it depends on what it is that you're trying to get accomplished. And everybody has to really come to terms with these things, and they tie a lot into our thoughts about masculinity and femininity and attraction and just that instinctual urge, as we're animals. We're just animals that can access the difference between a conscious mind and a subconscious mind, and we know that they exist, and we can kind of sometimes, bring to our own attention some of our more primal instincts. We may know, I can acknowledge it, but it doesn't mean that I'm not gonna do it. That's
right,
really the only thing that kind of separates us from other animals. Other animals just don't care. Like they don't have anything weighing them down like a conscious that stops them from doing whatever it is that they feel like, whatever their urges tell them to do. But we've
right,
built this society around us with certain rules, and certain things are acceptable and certain things aren't. So within those rules, we're always going to have to fight against just our nature, and keep that in check and understand, okay, this person I find attractive, but I am not a dog, like a real animal dog. So I can't just stare at them with my tongue out. I cannot do that. So I have to figure out a way to like sneak a peek, satisfy that urge, and then keep it moving. Right. So
I don't
it's
know.
and we do it as men and women. We've seen women objectify men if they're like extra muscular. We see it on TV, like The View. If somebody like Chris Hemsworth or The Rock or Idris Elba is on stage, they're like doing a little extra touch here and there that they can get away with, and it's all fun, right? When it's a man, it's hilarious when a woman does it to a man. But if a man does that same thing to a woman, it's unacceptable.
Right.
Point blank, period, right? And that's a double standard. That's a double standard in favor of women. But it's understandable because just like you said, men are stronger than women. So the thought of a man being overly aggressive is already seen as a, overpowering, or it can turn negative. Nobody really is concerned about the man in that situation. Okay, he got pinched on the butt cheek. He got,
Right.
His abs rubbed. She's holding on to his bicep. But at no point are you like, oh man, I'm concerned about the safety of this man, right? That's not a real concern that you will have, even if it's the exact same actions that are taking place. If it's a man doing the touching or a woman doing the touching, the thought process of what can happen to that person who is the so-called the victim. I say so-called because the man isn't really being victimized in my thought. And I'm a man. I understand that double standard. And I agree with it.
I mean, there's a
because I
lot
don't.
of like, I don't know, people are gonna get mad. What I don't go Rihanna and Chris Brown. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
she beating his ass? And then was he retaliating? We will never know because he didn't jump out the car and show scratches. She jumped out and showed, things. So we're more likely to believe that Chris Brown was an abuser versus maybe Rihanna was an abuser. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I had another example, but I'm thinking about
Well.
like sexual harassment in the workplace. When it comes from a man, it's like, if you're in the office with him and he's saying some things and then you're like, I gotta go to school. That's my colorful
Mm-hmm.
reference. I gotta go to school. And you can't get out of his office because he's
Mm-hmm.
overpowering you. Like the same thing, if you tried to do that to a man, he could just like, get your little ass out my way and he could walk out your door.
Because
I don't
sexual
know.
harassment in the workplace
It's so
does happen to
crazy.
men. But as a man, you try to say that to other men, and we're going to laugh at you.
Right.
And I'm not saying me, I'm saying we as a group, as men, me knowing, being around men and knowing how men think. If one of my friends, or if I came to a group of my friends and I said I was sexually harassed at work, and I'd be like, okay, well, great. Was she cute? And that's gonna
Right.
be the end of the conversation on the man's side. Is like, okay, if she was attractive, then what's the problem? It was a storyline in the movie Horrible Bosses
Okay. Yep.
where Jennifer Aniston was like coming on to Charlie Day, and his two male counterparts, his friends, when he was telling, they kept shutting him down. Was like, bro, we actually have bad bosses. Your boss is attractive, and she's just trying to sleep with you. Please shut up. And so that's the thought process. It's like, what are you talking about? Just do it
It
and
goes
get
back
over,
to the
or just
to the yeah,
move.
the boomerang. It goes back to the boomerang example as well.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. Was it feminine of him to like cook this meal and put the garlic butter in the steak and have everything and and then she would just like she almost was like, yo, you got a beer. She didn't do that, but she almost like literally knew how to like, take the top off of a beer on his counter and just like keep it moving and grab her like fancy little plate with the parsley on it and go and watch the Knicks game. It's he should have took his cue from the door. But when we get into relationships, we'll talk about,
Yeah.
and we could go back to, and once we get to, we can talk about shrinking, inside of like, if you're
Right.
really attracted to somebody, you start to shrink, or, like, oh, it doesn't matter. But I can't wait till we talk about that. But
So I
yes.
think that there's just a very necessary redefining of our expectations of masculinity, but I really believe we have to redefine femininity, because I don't think that everything associates, oh, you run like a girl or you throw like a girl.
Yeah.
Throwing, what are we talking about, right? Throwing. Are you throwing a ball? Are you throwing a ball that was, created for a sport that was invented by and primarily played by men from the offset? So your comparison of her throwing ability is already comparing it to men. So you're saying, oh, she doesn't know how to do this, which means women aren't coordinated or whatever. It's just this thought process of, why is everything being put on a scale of being comparing women's ability to what a man can do? It's an unfair characterization from the beginning. It doesn't really
And
make sense.
also, if you think about it, it's really crazy. So what is the goal? The goal is, I meet a guy and he's doing all of these masculine things. So I try to do all of these masculine things with him. Are we trying to be two men inside of a relationship? Like, what is the goal? You know what I mean? Or like, you can cook and she can cook. Y'all trying to have like, chopped in the kitchen, and then no, she lose, so she never gets to be in the kitchen again. Like, what is that? And then at what point do you just calm down and just kind of be his yin to the yang and just let it balance out? Like, that's why, like, and this always, every time we talk, it goes back to this. It's always about communication. And when you first, I don't know, like I said, when we get ready to talk about relationships, I'm gonna go in, but it's a no, but a lot of what we talk about is kind of ultimately going to
Yeah. Everything is
relationship,
building
and
up to that.
how do we coexist? You know what I mean? And then just communication is key, especially in the time of COVID. I think what's going to happen is we're going to be a lot more cautious about who we let into our lives. I think communication is definitely going to step up. If there are people who are still just kind of jumping out there, just getting into stuff just because they're reckless anyway, they probably don't wear masks or condoms, but that's a whole other conversation. But
I think this is going to actually hopefully create more communication. I feel more connected to people now than I did before, because I don't have as much access to people in real life. So if you're going to do, like, in real life, you can sit next to a person and not say anything and still kind of feel their energy.
Yeah.
And you can let that slip into something where you feel like you guys have spent enough time together to know each other, but you haven't really said anything, especially if you're getting physical with a person. Then the time passes by with the possibility of no communication at all, with two attractive people who are attracted to each other. But now, with having to actually be on a screen with somebody, I'm not just going to sit on the screen with you and stare at you and stare at the screen. I have to find something to say. Right. And then I will know if you're interesting and if I'm interesting to you, and if we can hold a conversation together. That hopefully will actually, create stronger relationships. And by the time you get into a room with another person, you'll be like, okay, I actually know how to speak to a person.
Right. I'm laughing because I'm thinking, like, imagine like saying, hey girl, I'll meet you on the Zoom. And then you just get on the Zoom and you're like,
right.
like, you know what I was gonna do? I just wanted
Yeah,
to,
just
be
yeah, just
next to you. Like,
on the Zoom, mind each other, and then talking with emojis in the private chat. It's like, okay,
yeah, no one's doing
but
that.
you're gonna have to learn how to talk to people. And so, like you said, communication is key. But I just think that even as women, all of us are responsible, but we need to, I think women need to take the authority and the control and redefine femininity for themselves. And I
Okay.
believe that, I mean, I know that there are books out there, so don't yell at me in the comment section. Like, there are books, there are many people who are already doing it. I'm talking about in the mainstream society, still what
Yeah.
we see in media, in TV shows, in movies, presented in all types of just mainstream media. Because there's always some type of research being done to advance the conversation academically. But when does that, transfer over to what the general public sees? I'm talking about the person who is, living in Benoit, Idaho, and
Des Moines.
Bumblecrup, North Dakota. Like, are those people getting access to these, advanced research papers and all these books that are being written? And I know people like Kimberly Crenshaw. I know people like Bell Hooks. They're out there getting the work done on womanism and feminism, and Angela Davis and all these people. They've been working tirelessly, but it's not permeating the culture in a way that it's changing people's mindset. And there is a lot that is changing in 2020. I just want to make sure that as we are entering into these conversations about valuing women, we uplift the value of their attributes and their strengths, and not only saying that their strength and their worth is what they can do in comparison to a man and what he brings to the table, or as it relates to masculinity. Are we actually valuing and upgrading our thoughts about what femininity is? Are we actually bringing that to the forefront, or are we just placing women in the place of men, still advancing the thoughts of masculinity? I want to advance the thought of femininity, and to also not have femininity seen as weak. Because even when you see it in the movie, oh, the girl can't play football, and the girl proves her worth to the boys because she can throw and she can play football.
Or she has to like cut
Why?
off her
Why
hair.
though?
She has to cut off her hair, tape down her breasts, go to another school, and then call herself Tony and start like walking through the
Right.
school like, hey. And then a guy's attracted to her, and he starts thinking he's gay because he's attracted to this other dude. It's so much. So you got good versus evil, black versus white, Democrats, Republicans, red and blue. Then you got masculine and feminine. So it's just like, why are we always in these different struggles and these different battles, and then to what end? And I know complacency is not a good thing, so you're always trying to improve yourself, and I don't know, this is crazy. Men are from
Yeah.
Mars, women are for Venus, and it's just
Hmm.
not. Yeah.
And the thought of that being, these two beings come from different planets. We function differently. Like,
Right,
it's
and that's
not
okay.
exactly, it's fine. Like, we biologically function differently. We produce different amounts of hormones. Like, yes, men produce estrogen, but at a significantly lower rate than women. We have testicles that produces much more testosterone, which comes out in a very aggressive way. That's what the testosterone chemical does in your body. It's a real chemical reaction. You can test it in science. It's a tough hormone. Women have testosterone as well. And we see that in menopause because they become a lot, more very direct
What?
because those estrogen levels start to go down because biology, the
So
eggs
a
aren't
menopausal
producing as
woman is
much.
like is more direct.
They Yes, that's what I've seen. And that's what I've read. Because those testosterone levels start to, I don't know if it's the testosterone levels just go up, or is it the fact that the estrogen levels just go down?
If I don't my cancer was triple positive, and it's because I produce more estrogen than I produce a lot of estrogen. I'm like a super woman, but at the same
Mm.
time, I have to wax like every month to get rid of like my beard. So it's like,
That's another form of yeah, testosterone.
oh, bruh.
So I just want to make sure that while we have this conversation, yes, we're going to get into toxicity, but there's no way to go into toxic
Yeah.
without actually talking about the actual term. Like toxic is the prefix, it's the adjective. So if you're going to talk about toxic masculinity and not have a full understanding of what masculinity is and what femininity is, you can't really have a conversation about it. Not a not an intelligent one, because it's not going to make sense. So let's see. I just want to make sure that we don't devalue the feminine in an attempt to bring respect to women, but only valuing them as it relates to what they can do that is tied to masculinity. That's my closing point on just the femininity issue, just it in itself. Right. So let's go into toxic masculinity. What is that to you? What does that mean to you, Rocco Bella?
So
And feel free in the comments to answer this question as well.
yes, we welcome your comments. I think about misogyny. Mansplaining definitely comes into it, like not valuing a woman's voice, um, thinking that
Mm-hmm.
a woman deserves for a specific action to happen to her because she dressed a certain way. So Amber Mark, who
Right.
is a singer, she has this song called 1894, and she says she's
Mm-hmm.
going to flex on the floor. um it's not 1894, like she's going to a club, she has her cleavage showing and she's doing all these things, but she's doing those things for her. She's not doing them to try to attract you, or to try to make you think that she wants sex. Like girls will go out and want to be attractive to themselves, and just it's an inner feeling that we try to achieve. But you have men who think, well, why you wear that short skirt if you didn't want me to look up it? Like, well, what is, like, I didn't buy this skirt because I'm like, oh, I hope Johnny look up my skirt. So it's just thinking about just overexerting your ability to be masculine. So the word patriarchy kind of comes to mind, but then we could talk about
Yeah.
matriarchy and how that can be abusive. I know personally men who are domestic violence victims, from
Mm.
women, and sometimes it's because he just refuses to hit her back, and then she just keeps going and going. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so just the whole thing about you know, because I'm a man and I said so. Because you said so. Like, Bella, what you said so about didn't even make any sense. And then when you start saying, you raise the sound of your voice, well, now you're nagging. Now he can't hear your, because now you got to bring it down, and it's just, you can't get a woman can't get her word in because he
Mm.
gets tone deaf to your points. Now it doesn't matter what you're saying because you're yelling. Just I have down here the promotion of violence, but I don't know if I want to go there. It's just like when I don't know. Not that I think my son was a toxic male when I refused to buy him guns and he could like pick up one of his a stick outside and still be like bang, 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 bang. But just kind of, I'm thinking more so asserting yourself over a woman because you're bigger, and
Not
and
even
men are
just a
more,
woman though.
yeah.
Toxic
Oh,
masculinity can be internal as well.
oh,
It
tell
can
your
be
story.
well, it's not a story that I think of right off the top of my head, but I see it as impacting men as well based on our expectations from what we have from other men.
Okay.
Like just by, okay, if you're not having sex by 8th grade, you are looked at funny, or at least around that age, everybody is lying about whether they have or have not around 7th, 8th grade. And the expectation of, being able to get women and how many, those things start internally with other men. That expectation comes inside, and the pressures of it come from other people, whether it be older men, uncles, older cousins, peers, and just pressuring boys into that frame, and getting and creating that mentality that this is how I get my value, by having more than one woman, by being able to, show them as, numbers. And so that devaluation of women comes from older men. And now the boy starts to put their value. I am only worth how many of these women I can get, or I am only worth. So it's really a case of, how they say a lot of the times, some predators, if you look in their history, they've been victims.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's almost like toxic masculinity, like we said, toxic is poisonous, right? So it's contagious. So it comes from an influence of other people. And yeah, it's at the full expense of women, right? They get the brunt of the negativity of it. But it is also the men who are being, the boys who are being taught this, to value their manhood in this way, is unhealthy. And what happens is there becomes this foggy line between, okay, now where does the masculinity start, and where does the masculinity end, and where does the toxicity start?
Huh.
And
So
it's very difficult because your entire mentality of masculinity is tied to these toxic views of it. This, I have to take advantage of people in order to be seen as a man. I have to be bigger and tougher than you. So, bullying and those types of things, I have to, if you're weaker or smaller than me, and it's funny because if you are, when you see people with the most self-confidence, like you mentioned, The Rock, right? The Rock
yeah,
is probably bigger than most people that he would stand next to. But when you see The Rock, he's smiling, he's, the interactions that he has with people and the testimonies that they'll have about their interaction with him is that he is one of the nicest people that you'll meet.
right.
And most of the times when you're confident, there's no need to peacock.
Yeah.
I don't need to tell you how tough I am because I already believe it myself. So I don't have to go out of my way to prove it. And a lot of the times toxicity, toxic masculinity comes out in very people who have a very low self-worth. They don't have the confidence, so they have to poke it out. And you mentioned short men before. And there's a certain thing called a Napoleon
Only
syndrome,
complex. Yeah.
Napoleon complex, where because of their stature, they feel like they have to overly compensate to other men and to women. They're like,
Right.
I have to walk in the room and be seen. I have to make sure that everybody knows that, I'm the man and I'm the leader and I'm the this, right?
It's like,
And
hey, little man. He's like,
as a person who has a little bit of stature, it's like I walk in a room and I don't have to be concerned with that. And it's just most of the times when people are like, oh, I'm the best, I'm the one, and you hear people say, let other people give you the accolades. Let other people, as a part in the Bible, is like never sit at the head of the table, because you never know when the owner of the house is going to have to embarrass you and tell you to sit somewhere else. Always sit somewhere lower, where if they tell you to sit, if they upgrade your ticket to first class, then you look like you got leveled up instead of
right.
dismissed. So it's a combination of all those things. Is low self-esteem, low self-value, that turns into toxic, because you look at just the the general thought of masculinity that we just covered, where we talked about strength and protection, and these things that can be tools used for positivity.
Right.
Chivalrous. I want to make sure that I do for the woman, so that I take things off of her plate that she doesn't have to do. It becomes toxic when I am telling her not that she doesn't have to do it, but that she can't do it. It's a
So here's
difference.
something
Go
that
ahead.
I was thinking about. A lot, okay, no definitive statements. I have to get used to that. And I'm saying that not that T Jamal is telling me, stop it, but it's something that it's a personal thing that I'm working on, to just stop being so definitive. But toxic masculinity coming from toxic femininity. By that I mean a man who's raised by only his mother, and his mother has these viewpoints of how she thinks a man is supposed to act, and she
Mm,
is the head of the household, so she's doing all this wolfing and getting things in check. So this young boy figures out that the way he's going to have to exist in the world is these rules, or these goals that this woman who ran the house by herself like set for him. So a lot of times when you see a man coming out, and when I say coming out, I mean like being a part of society, and trying to define himself as masculine. It's coming from what may be a toxic female, this matriarch of the family, this person who, boy, you need to, whatever, and then he kind of puts all of these things inside of it. I recently saw this movie called Premature, which I really loved. And in it,
okay.
the guy walked on the outside. Like first they were walking on the street, and then he walked outside, like near the curb. And this reasoning for wanting to walk outside of the curb was, he said, because his mama told him that. And then he was like, well, it's because, you might get snatched from, somebody from a car might come and snatch you. And then she said, well, what if they snatch me into a building? So it's just this whole kind of, he was displaying his masculinity, but then she was modern day challenging it. So there's this thing about traditional masculinity, and then this female challenging of, like, we no longer need that skill set because we exist in this type of XYZ, um, you know, uh, world. And just even if you go back and you think about Antoine Fisher, which was just a very kind of crazy movie, just the matriarchal symbolism in that movie, and how he was able to rise to the top and be considered a man. We do say that men, a man ass man, you're just a man ass man. But we think about we think about, like, how do men evolve, and where do they come from? Did their dad have a little voice? Did their dad overpower their mother? Were they raised only by their moms? But I don't have a lot any evidence of a man that was raised just by a father alone. Like, what are those men like? And it's just, I don't know. It's just kind of, it's thought provoking, nonetheless. You know, just to kind of put that out there, and say, but just think about it. It's toxic masculinity bred from toxic femininity. You know, like a matriarch of the family. Is she the cause of producing
I've
these
seen
these men?
I've seen toxic masculinity come from men not really understanding what our value in the current society is. So, for example, it was very clear that a man would go out and hunt, a man would go out to war, a man would go off to protect the family, a man was the first line of defense, you know, from the elements, from, you know, wilderness, from those things. I used my strength in a way that was productive for the family, and I showed that I could provide. And then even up until like the industrial age, a man went out to the factory, a man worked, a man brought in the money, a man provided for the family, so on and so forth. Now you get into an age where the work is less physical. There's nothing that can say that a man is anywhere physically or mentally superior as a stockbroker than a woman could be. You know, as a lawyer or as a judge or any job where you have to sit down and push papers and count. Like there's no advantage of being a man in those positions. So
But
there's
yet
really
he
no
still earns
reason.
more.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
And
and
that's
and and, and
toxic
there's that. Like, why are you making more money than me? Like, you know,
because the man feels like a woman still first of all has the value of only being the only one that can actually carry the child and give birth to the child. So that's purposeful. It's always going to be purposeful. It's always going to be value linked to that. There's always going to be value linked to what a woman can do that a man can't do. But now we're entering an age where there are things that women can do that men can't do. And now women can do what men can do as well. But there's nothing that men can do that women can't.
hmm.
So men lose sight of their own value. So they have to overly push it. They have to state it by, okay, if you can do the same job as me, I have to at least get paid more. It's toxic because men have lost the sight of their own value, which is one of the reasons I wanted to have this show to talk to a woman, to talk to women in our comments. And as we start to, you know, grow and start doing this live, to talk to women live, to ask them, in a world where we know that women have access physically, biologically, to do things that men cannot do, right? So your value is intact in that sense, if you want to go down that line. And then if you want to go a more non-traditional route, there are not that many jobs left that are like require this physicality where it's thought of that the men need to do this. More jobs are in corporate offices than not in major cities in our current society. Hell, everything's about to be on a computer soon, and we all might be out of work. But we all can push a button on a keyboard. We all can, you know, do a math problem and figure out the formula. We all can sit at a desk for 8 hours and do whatever. So there is no advantage that the man has, and he's lost sight of his role. So and this is my interpretation of what's happening in the workplace and how toxicity is spread through society and in politics. There's nothing that says that a woman can't be president as well as a man. However, there are these these people grasping on to the last clinks of, I need to hold on to my masculinity, because if I lose this element, what else do I have? What am I bringing to the table? If my wife is making more money than me, she's doing the same job as me, or she's getting hired over me, what is my value? What is my worth? What am I bringing to the table? Just being a tool, just to reach at the top of the sink, or I can get the cereal from the top of the refrigerator, or I can get the can, I can open the bottle or the jar of pickles. Like, what am I here for? And so men are struggling with that. So they are holding on very tightly to the last little things that they have control over. And those things, when you are unconfident, like I was saying, when you have Napoleon complex, or, they say men who drive big flashy cars are overcompensating for something. Um, we have to look at toxic masculinity as a form of overcompensation for a loss of value in themselves. So they try to devalue women in order to make themselves feel bigger. And we know that this comes primarily from European patriarchy. And Europeans have a history of trying to make other people feel lower or inferior to make themselves feel better. That's what we're dealing with racism. We know now, by knowing history of all of the kingdoms and all of the advancements and all of the universities from Kemet to Timbuktu, where Europeans came to learn, they don't want us to know any of that because they want to convince us as Black people that we are inferior. So how is that any different from what white male patriarchy that has also been indoctrinated into Black men that are raised in the Western Hemisphere? How is that any different? It's just a loss of value. I'm scratching. I got to hold on to this advantage, and I'm losing grip of it because I don't know what is my advantage now. I don't feel like it's an equal yin yang. She's clearly more valuable than I am, so I got to hold on to something to show my worth. Now, have you ever thought about that, and what are your thoughts on that?
First, I'm going to say, wow. No, I never thought about that. So does that, one of the things that comes to mind is, does that mean that the roles reverse? Are men going to be in the kitchen cooking, and women are going to be out, making the money? That's a lot for a man to have to do. There are some things where they say men are more sensitive than women, because we always constantly express ourselves, and men hold things in, and they try to figure out when's the best way to say something. Like you've talked about, like if you're trying to watch a game and your wife is not in a mood, it can mess up you just trying to watch the game. Now, if I'm trying to watch, I don't know, I'm just going to be real stereotypical here, like Real Housewives, and and my man has a pissy attitude, I'll be like, oh, he messing with me. Oh my God, go ahead, Mimi. It just, it doesn't affect us. So I wrote down mansplaining, and writing down like, okay, so mansplaining possibly always.
I lost you.
Okay. Can
Oh,
you
there
see
you
me
go.
now? Wow, that was
I
weird.
could always see you. I couldn't hear you.
Okay.
I got
So
you. You're back now.
mansplaining,
Mm-hmm.
right? Let's say mansplaining always exists. But as from the story you just told, the man's role in society starts to minimize. Now women do not hate me. I am a feminist. Like, we went and found mansplaining. So now we can't even let you interpret stuff for us. So we are wiping out
Your volume keeps going away. It's like
uh,
it comes
I
in
don't
and
know.
goes out.
I see it, and the screen is like double black over here. So I don't know
Oh, okay.
what's happening. But I was just saying, I don't know if I made my
Mm-hmm.
point, but mansplaining, it's like
Mm-hmm.
all these other things are being taken away, and then we go and we find mansplaining, and we like, oh, did you know they mansplain? And now it's like, by the time this is over, y'all not gonna have nothing, because we're gonna be like, oh, he also, women are called cooks and a man is called a chef. Oh, what is that
Mm-hmm.
all about? A woman is a bookkeeper and a man is an accountant. Mariama's a seamstress. She's not a designer. It's just all of
Right.
these, so now we're digging, we're digging deeper, and we can talk about what is going on with my. I'm so sorry. I don't know. We're not in a Mercury retrograde. Um, and we can talk about how we're just digging into a whole bunch of things and exposing them. And at the end of the day, we're just gonna be like,
But we need each other though. So
I
everything,
don't
the
know.
problem is too often stuff has been swept under the rug, and it was like, okay, let's just not talk about these things. If you put all of the cards on the table and you look at the entire deck, guess what women can tell men? I don't just see you as a tool. Your your value to me as a woman in this relationship wasn't only to bring money in. There are other things that you can do. I talk to my wife about this all the time. Like, what is it that you value about me? Right? And just being able to articulate that and have that conversation. And because the thing is, toxic, what makes a baby cry? A baby cries for attention because it doesn't have the words to express what it actually wants. So you're just guessing, okay, are they hungry? Do they need to be changed? Are they actually in pain? You don't know. So you try to start to interpret what those cries mean. And I believe that a lot of the times as men, toxicity is a cry for help. We have an idea how to articulate feeling. We don't know how to say, I don't know what my value in this current society is. The current society I created because I kept trying to find advancements to make life easier and to make jobs easier. And so I've advanced in technology myself out of
Me
value.
too.
Like I've I've made myself obsolete. So I believe that what we need is these rules of engagement for
Yeah.
women to actually tell us this is what I value in a man. In relationship, in business, these are the things that we value in men. These are the things that men do that we admire. And then men, these are the things that women do that we admire. Women being able to define and identify what femininity is for them and not having it solely compared to masculinity and having what is masculine be what is dominant. Dominant, superior, right? Those words don't need to be attached to one or the other because what
Right.
it is now it's like, no, we want femininity to be dominant and superior. No, yin yang, neither force is dominant. They are two equally powerful opposing forces that create a balance. It's so much stuff that so many dumb things that I would do if I did not have women in my life to say, hey, maybe you should think about it like this. And I'm not even talking about like marriage, definitely that. But even prior to that, like I always had more female friends than male friends, and it just brought a different perspective of how to see things and how to think about things. And they say the same thing about me. Like, I will say things in a way that, like, I never would have even thought about it like that. I'm glad that, you're around.
Yeah.
We balance one another. There is not supposed to be a competition. Like, just because yin and yang are opposing forces, like a car doesn't move without friction.
Right.
There needs to be opposing forces. If that rubber tire didn't create friction when it hits that tar pavement, it wouldn't move. The
Right.
same thing with the car engine. There are opposing, what do you call those, circuits. So as they go into each other, one is moving clockwise, one is moving counterclockwise, and when they run into each other, they create the spark that makes your engine run. But if they were moving in the same direction, they wouldn't touch each other and nothing would move.
Right.
You need opposing forces. You need confrontation. And confrontation doesn't always have to be conflict.
Okay.
Conflict is when it turns into like combative. But confrontation just means you face things head on. You have the conversation. It may feel icky. It may be uncomfortable. But once you get it out there, you're like, you know what? That wasn't so bad. Because you feel like you're going to be ridiculed just by saying these things. And how many times have you been afraid to talk to your parents or talk to your significant other about something? And then they just take it in stride and be like, okay, I understand. And you're like, man, I've been
Yeah.
stressing all day to have this conversation, and it wasn't even as bad as I thought it was going to be.
Right.
So a lot of the times we are so afraid of the possible consequence that we never really have the conversation, or we never really have that dialogue, or we never get it out, and we hold stuff in. And when you hold anything in, it becomes poisonous. It becomes toxic.
Right.
So,
Right. And then maybe that's what it's all about is um we don't share enough of what we are experiencing, so we hold it in and we just kind of assume that this is how we need to respond. So it
yep.
becomes toxic because not because it's contagious and it's poisoning us. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? And we're keeping it in and we're doing this whole thing. This started out really light. It got really, really heavy. I did want to say one thing, just to kind of not to keep rehashing this, but to go back to short men. I'm 5'3.5", and some people will be like, "Oh, you're supposed to be with a short guy." I am. I used to say, if I can't hide behind you, I don't want to be with you. Like, if I cannot hide behind you, I want to be with you. I had this amazing conversation in this bar one time with this guy. He was sitting on a stool, and I never thought to like look down and see that his feet weren't touching the floor. I just didn't. He was just talking to me, and the conversation was so amazing. It was awesome. And then when we got ready to leave, because even if you're in the bar or somewhere and you're sitting on a stool with a tall guy, you're the same size. It's just really weird. He got off the stool, and I got off the stool, and we were the same height. And I think the look on my face just like destroyed his soul. But I was just like, like, oh my God, like what am I supposed to do with you? Put you in my pocket? I think I said that to him. Oh, it's so bad. But
So
and I
let's go back.
forgot about the amazing conversation that we had. I didn't even take any of that into
Yeah.
credit. I immediately took in the concept like I could probably outrun him.
I wanna go back from that point that you just made to go back a little bit earlier where you were talking about a man just pushing a woman, and if a man punches a woman, it would be, more painful, right? So the physicality of it. But women underestimate what you guys do with your words that pierce a man internally, that because most men don't know how to articulate themselves the same way that women do, because they are always talking to one another. So they get that quick wit, they get those jabs out at each other. Women are always just going on, and I'll say most women, because there are outliers. Like, I'm an outlier man who has a lot to say. And then there are outlier women who don't have much to say. So, of course, there are outliers, but we're talking about, the majority and what the perspective is and how it's presented, right? So most women are used to talking, but even in a relationship, women they get to know us and they get to know the buttons, and they can say something that feels worse than any punch. It feels worse than getting knocked out by Mike Tyson, right? So it's like not understanding the power in that, and there is really no hold back on it in a lot of cases. Like, men, even the crazy ones that will let themselves loose and hit a woman, which I am never an advocate for. I don't care if she's throwing a lamp at you. You walk the hell away. Like, and I've seen women throw lamps and pans at men. My grandma from that generation, where they'll pour hot grease on a person. And so, but as a man, you walk away, bro. Like, you get yourself out of that situation. So, but like those words though, sometimes you're in that conversation and you don't know what to do, and you're just like stuck. She shot off at you so many jabs, and it's like acupuncture needles. They just keep going, and instead of healing you, they are piercing your soul, and you don't know what to do with it. So sometimes I think, when we talk about toxic femininity in a way, sometimes women don't know how painful it is. Like you were saying, men are sensitive because we don't always get it out, and we hold a lot in. So when we are vulnerable with a woman, and then she in turn uses that vulnerability or something I told her in confidence, and she uses it as a blade, it cuts even deeper. Because I didn't share this with everybody. And it took me a minute to share it with you. And now you're going to use it as a tool in a fight against me. And now I'm shut all the way in. So it's just interesting. Like, a part of understanding your agency as a woman is understanding, just how much power you have in a situation, and being aware of when you are using it, when you are abusing it, right? So it's the same thing with this toxic masculinity, and not understanding that men have value outside of our traditional traits of what we define masculinity and being. And by not understanding what that value is, then we toxify the entire, perception of who we are, by trying to overcompensate for what we think we are losing grip of. Wow. So yeah, it's interesting. And this is not going to be like, this conversation is going to permeate through everything. Like, we talked about agency, we talked about gender roles, we talked about, in this episode, toxicity and masculinity and femininity, the thoughts about masculinity and femininity. Because what I see, and I want to make sure that we answer this question, right? Because we answered the line of delineation. I believe the line of delineation between just healthy masculinity and femininity into toxicity is like losing where the value is in either one. And with femininity, trying to define worth based on the structure of masculinity. And then toxic masculinity
that also kind of touches on what last week, when I was talking about, or in previous things, Russell Brand, when he was making his comments about Cardi and what's her face, Meg, he was being accused of mansplaining feminism. But basically what he was saying is that they were existing in defining femininity by what a man had said, what a woman is supposed to wear, and this is so
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So just making sure that we put it all on the table and be able to converse and not shut people down when it's time to have the conversation as if they don't have something to contribute. So, what I see a lot though in the battle against toxicity, and most of the time is against toxic masculinity, because that's the one that people focus on more. People don't even really address toxic femininity as an entity. But how do we combat toxicity while not compromising the core values of either? Right. So the core, the positive attributes of what masculinity is and what it brings and the value of it, and the core value of femininity and what they bring. How do we combat the toxicity while not throwing away the entire baby? Like people want to throw away masculinity altogether, it seems.
right, right,
I've heard people say that, the cis straight male, the cis straight black male is one of the, worst whatevers in everything. And it's just like, okay, you just can't say that straight men are the enemy. Like we can't just keep going around and saying stuff like this. What is the goal? And I always say this, what's the result that you want? Do you want to create a permanent enemy, or do you want to create a healthy identification of masculinity? Do you want men to protect you? Because there's also, at the same time, you have a conversation saying that the cis straight black man, right, is one of the weakest elements in the movement. But then also you hear black men aren't protecting black women. So what do I take from that? So I'm not healthy as, exerting my masculinity, but you still want my protection. So what do I find in that? How do I take those two seemingly opposing ideas? Because if I'm not going to exert my masculinity, which protection and strength are core values or core thoughts in that, but then you're also going to tell me that we're not protecting you. So the expectation of protection is there. So how do we exert that? What does that look like? You're telling me what you don't want, but you're not telling me how to serve it.
okay.
You're showing me
So,
the menu, right? Go ahead.
so I might get in trouble for this. So, is this why someone or the oligarchy decided that they need to monitor and control all of this? Is this why we have rules? Is this why we have laws? Is this why we have, all of these things? Because right now, we could say we're living in a lawless-esque society. If we did
Hmm.
not have everyone giving their opinion all the time on social media, um, we would still kind of have these other norms that would exist. I mean, I'm listening to you. I just saw a post on social media where someone said that tell black men to to not want black women to always be strong. Like stop expecting us to always be strong and this and that and the third. And then it's just like, but then we want to be strong. So and then you could scroll down to the very next post and it says something contradictory. And then you see a video of a woman like knocking out a guy with one punch because he refuses to hit her back. And it's just like, what do we want? People, like, what do we want? What are we doing? What is our ultimate goal? What are we going, towards? Like, I personally, I would love to just find me a boo and just unplug and just go to the mountains or the country or someplace else and be void of all these other outside influences, and then kind of see if we could start all over or some kind of way. I don't know, but
I
this
think
is getting
one of my favorite words for this week that I've been using a lot is nuance. We don't know how to have nuanced conversations, because it's not that opposing ideas are necessarily contradictory, but sometimes you have people having these conversations out of context, and it's never had in a dialogue. It's never had in a conversation. It's a bunch of random social media posts, and then you are responding to it in 120 characters or whatever, or in a picture or in a meme, where it doesn't really get the entire thought across. And there's no way to converse like that. Like, okay, I see a meme. I disagree with the meme. I'm in the comments. Okay, now the person from the post is responding to my comment, and I'm going back and forth with the person who did the post as well as the people who support the post in the comments. And then it gets personal, and then attacks start happening. And then you're having a conversation with people that you don't know. You don't even know if they exist on the internet, and you're just typing back and forth. And it's like, is this how the dialogue is going to progress? And what is the end result? And I say this because most of the work of African Unity Initiative is about, building Black progression across the African diaspora. So I talk a lot about race, ethnicity, that type of thing. This program is about Black people, but it's
Right.
about the fact that we need to not be enemies on one of our core principles. There's no family unit without the male and the female, without the man and the woman coming to a place of understanding how to interact with one another. And while we are bickering amongst ourselves over petty garbage, we're not going to get anywhere. And it is just frustrating. And I needed to create this platform so that we can model how to have a conversation. We come from two different backgrounds. We
Right.
come to each topic every time. You say something that I never thought about. I say something that you never thought about. We come
Yep.
away from here learning from each other every single week. We do not see that daily on social media. I don't see any learning taking place.
Right. And you don't see any real, people haven't even thought about, like, if you come across something and it's totally against your morals and anything that you agree with, and then you share it. Like, now you're exposing it to other people. If you disagree with it,
Right.
shut it down right there with you. Like, I remember seeing a fight at a movie theater that somebody put, and my response to that, I just did a whole other post. Like, I just saw a video of a fight at a movie theater. I just refuse to share it. Like, we have to stop. I'm not. If you want to find it, Google whatever. But I'm not putting it out there. And then so
Mm-hmm.
many people, and then does it does it go back to just being lazy and complacent? You don't want to get a job, you don't want to work for nothing, you don't want to build a garden. All you want to do is sit here and try to find something that's going to make you viral, so you're just trying to be viral so you can get sponsors and you can sell spaghetti sauce. Like, I don't know, like,
Mm-hmm.
what is what are people just lazy anymore?
It's too much access to get your voice heard. And I made this
Yeah.
point. When you had to write a letter to voice your frustration or your, disdain or even agreement with something, you had to edit yourself. When you had to sit down and grab a piece of paper, actually get a pen or a pencil, write it down. You had to read over it before you sent it. People are tweeting without reading it. Got
Right.
all types of, you using YOUR as your, like, people don't know the difference between your and your. They don't know the difference between the three different theirs. There's a they are contraction. There's a there that's possessive. There's a there that's over there. People don't know any difference. They just putting all of it. It's just, as a former teacher, it makes my brain want to blow up. And it's like, who let y'all out of school? And but you don't have to be out of school to be on Twitter.
Right.
So it's like,
Right. But
what
and
are
then,
y'all
I mean,
learning?
and then we could go on. It also, like you said, you don't have to be out of school to be out of Twitter. You got kids who are watching their parents who are spending all of this time on social media. So what are they going to, when they grow up, they're like, oh, I have to have a job, I have to do this, and then I also have to spend some time on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy.
Yeah. So I don't think that this conversation, I want to keep pushing these types of dialogues. And eventually we will have guests on and we will cover some of these topics. These are just like the preliminary coverings of these topics, right? So that when we
Right.
get into deeper conversations, these first few episodes will still be referenced. There's always going to be places to reference toxicity, places to reference gender roles, places to reference agency and protection, and all these things that we are going to be talking about as we move along into more, specific topics. And I just hope that people walk away from here actually having a conversation, actually having
Right.
a dialogue, not a monologue, not a screaming, yelling on your, IG live where you are the only person talking and there's one to bounce your ideas off of it. And then when somebody is bouncing off of you, make sure it's not coming out of a place of just, I've been holding these feelings for so long that it's coming out as like an attack. And I think
Right.
that's a lot of the times where we don't get anywhere in these conversations because women feel like they've been holding in how they, feel in their mistreatment for so long that it comes out as a lashing. And then the same thing when we were just talking about men not being able to articulate, and it comes out as a lashing. So if we make these types of dialogues more consistent, it would be, I think we would get to a place of having more fruitful experiences, and we can get to a place where we can eliminate toxicity and not at the expense of the core values of masculinity and femininity. Right?
Right.
I can acknowledge that, there are other people in the world that have different feelings from me, but also
Right.
try to gain an understanding of where they're coming from.
Right.
So it's it's something that has to be continued. It has to be maintained. Even when we get there, we have to learn how to, do maintenance. Back to the car analogy. If you have a car that's running fine and you don't ever get the oil change or a tune up, it's not going to be running fine. Like, even if it works, every time you go to the shop isn't to get the brakes changed or the engine or the transmission changed. One way you can not have to get a new engine is by making sure that you do maintenance every now and then. Even when we get to a place of desired conversation, we still have to maintain those relationships, those bonds, those expectations where you have to have the hard conversation. And if you wash your clothes every weekend versus washing your clothes every 3 months, you're going to have less clothes to wash if you do it every week. So if we have
Right.
the conversation more often, there's less baggage that we have to unpack every time we talk. It don't have to be, okay, let me get my brain together. Let's see what's about to come up in this conversation.
Right.
You know,
Right.
if you do it on a
Right.
more consistent basis, it's less baggage. It's less stuff that you've been holding on to that's gonna come out in a vitriolic way because you let it out. I know. Okay. And I've
Right.
already have begun to take the steps to change whatever needs to be changed, to improve upon whatever needs to be improved upon, to keep doing the things that you said you like, all of that. Any last thoughts?
No, I mean, I think, um, it, the goal is to be self-aware and, in my opinion, practice mindfulness and just kind of, just realize that you're here because of other people. Gifts that you have that have been implanted in you are not for you. For you, it's a gift so that you can share with other people, regardless if it's a talent like singing or dancing. But even if you have the gift of insight, of wisdom, of organization, if you just know how to clean a house, really, really well. Maybe you might need to help a friend who's going through a downtime and just help them out. So I think self-awareness is key. I think mindfulness is key, and everyone kind of lives in their, I think, their id, that the really loud ego spectrum that's just like me, 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 and nobody realizes how it impacts each other. And then it also comes because for some reason, a lot of us have gotten into this survival mode. It's not competition, it's about survival. So we're out here, and subconsciously we are just trying to survive. So we don't care how other people feel about stuff. We just want to make sure that I'm going to wake up tomorrow, I'm going to breathe in and out, and I'm going to take what's mine. And that's beyond that's not mindfulness, that's not self-aware. That's that id, or that super ego. I forget what the levels are, but it's the one that just kind of gobbles up everything with no kind of awareness of other people. And that is, we're bringing down towers, we're destroying statues, we're renaming streets, we're doing all this other stuff. But like Ryan Wilson said, we're not attacking the root cause. Conversations like this attack the root cause. The best relationship I ever had was with someone who didn't want to be in a relationship, but the key to that relationship is we talked all the time. Even when we couldn't figure out what the issue was, we would just start off with like, I'm uncomfortable with that. And then we would build on it, and we would listen. Like, he listened to me. He didn't make changes that compromised who he was. He accommodated the small requests. And at first I was just taking it and didn't realize that I was just taking. Then I started saying, hey, maybe I could change this because he's changing that. So self-awareness, just being aware of how much you express yourself and how rude you are sometimes, and how like nobody really asks you for your rude ass opinion. So just stuff like that would help all of this. So I'm excited about where this came from, where it is, and where it goes. And I know we're talking about the general, we're laying our foundation for our podcast, by the topics. But when we start to dive deep into dating and into marriage and into wardrobe, into jobs, we have laid this foundation of agency and toxicity and the mindset. And now let's take this mindset and just apply it to food, religion, like Christianity, spirituality. We can we can lay it all down on that. And honestly, it would be great if intimate sexual relationships could evolve like that. First of all, your list of questions is not like, oh, how tall you are, how many girlfriends you had, but it's just like, what is your definition of masculinity? What is your definition of this? And then the conversation starts that way. I think that would be a good way. Yeah.
Because we don't realize that she may coming into the relationship having this set of expectations, and you come in with these set of expectations, and then it becomes a problem when you feel like the person isn't living up to your expectations of what she's supposed to do or what he's supposed to do, when you never had a conversation about what those are. You're like, oh, you're cute and you're smart and I can have a conversation with you. And that pretty much is everything. That's as far as most people go. And so we just hope that these dialogues, we want your engagement in the comments though. Really like, share, comment, share and comment, share and comment, so we can get all of your thoughts as the audience, so we can understand where you are. Have you ever thought about these things in the way that we're talking about them? If you're a woman, have you ever thought about the things from Rocco Bella's perspective? Do you agree with the angles that she's coming from? If you're a woman, did you have a different upbringing, and have a different point of view? If you're a man, do you disagree with me? If you're a man, do you agree with me? If you're a woman, do you agree with me? If you're a man, do you agree with Rocco Bella? All of it. We want to know how these conversations are progressing. And like she said, we're going to get into a lot of more, curated, specific conversations where all of these, beginning episodes will continuously be referenced. So we just appreciate you guys for watching. We love the support, and we will be here the same time next week. Peace.